Hello, my name is John Coughlin, and I teach at New York University in Abu Dhabi. It's my pleasure to be able to share a few thoughts about Eugenio Corecco. Eugenio Corecco was one of the greatest canonists of the post-Vatican II period, and in my humble opinion, he is the single greatest canonist. The first time that I read his scholarship, I knew I had encountered a superior mind, a disciplined scholar, and one who loved and cared deeply for the Church. Today, I would like to speak about two aspects of his work. First, the unity of law and theology, and second, synodality. So first, the unity of canon law and theology. Corecco means by this a methodological option. It's a way of understanding the law. And one can detect this option in the 1983 Code of Canon Law, where virtually every major section of the code begins with a reference, either verbatim or a paraphrase, of one of the documents of Vatican II. The canon law is incorporating a theological aspect. It's a way of understanding, interpreting, and applying canon law. I do not understand Corecco to be saying that canon law and theology are identical. There's always the traditional distinction, of which he was very well aware, between speculative reason and practical reason. Theology is speculative. Law is practical. And so canon law, like other systems of law, aims to set the optimal conditions for individual and communal flourishing. It tries to balance the protection of individual rights with the common good, and it's unified with theology because it's always to be interpreted and applied with the mystery of love that is the center of the Church. One can detect this historically in the canon law. Hostiensis defined canonical equity as justice tempered by sweet mercy. And sometimes when I read Corecco, I have this in mind. Now, this is not to say that every provision of canon law is theological. There are provisions of canon law that are just like law in any other secular system of law, that are aiming to attempt some practical end. However, as a whole, Corecco points out to us that we really can't adequately understand canon law unless we put it in its theological context. The unity of canon law and theology is a special provision that secular systems of law do not share. And as a comparativist of different systems of law, I think that Corecco, in pointing out the unity of law and theology, has made another important contribution to scholarship. And that is, he's contributed to the conversation about what is law. Canon law is a type of law. It's a law that has unity with theology. Let me also say some brief words about Corecco's view of synodality. First of all, Corecco pointed out that synodality is essential to the ministry of bishops. And he also, long before the current adoption of the notion of a synodal church, talked about the role of the laity with regard to synodality. Corecco did not understand the laity as some kind of adjunct or some type of supplementary role to the clerics and bishops. Rather, he sees the role of the laity in synodality as essential to synodality itself. Here's a quote from in his own words. The sensus fidei is not that of aiding the ministerial priesthood, but expressing their own testimony and their own opinion on the faith and ecclesiastical discipline. And so Corecco foresaw what Pope Francis presently speaks about as a synodal church and the vital role that the laity are to play in the consultative process of a synodal church. This was for Corecco a way of reinvigorating the church's communion and mission. And so I leave you with these two thoughts today. One about his contribution with regard to the unity of canon law and theology, and the other about his contribution with regard to synodality. There's much more that could be said, but these alone, I think, represent indications of the greatness of Eugenio Corecco. Thank you very much.